There we go. Live on the old internet, as they say.
There we are.
They being us.
Wearing our sweaters.
You got a kind of a Mr. Rogers thing going on with yours.
Yeah, I got a cardigan. You got the quarter zip.
Yep. Feeling pretty good.
Getting to be the holiday season. Sweater time.
Yeah.
Everybody's busting out their sweaters.
It's prime sweater time. What's going on here over on the wall? We're trying
Paint
out some
samples. See, the one on top is simply white.
They look identical.
And the one below it is decorator's white.
They both just look like primer.
The painter who came in literally scoffed at me when I told him that I thought they looked the same. You'll note that the one on top is a little more yellow. The one underneath has a little bit more of a warmer hue.
So which way are you leaning right now?
Warm.
Okay.
I think because of the lighting in here, the top one would look overwhelmingly yellow, if that's what we went with. So, but it's dim in here, you know?
It is kind of dim.
There's lots of lights in here, but somehow, especially during the winter months, it's dim. So
you had a painter come in and just do that. And then he was like, well, you obviously have a lot to think about. I'll leave you to your decision.
Well, there are some other samples upstairs, but that's not going to be his only job. Come in and just put the samples up.
Well, here we are for the live chat. Welcome everybody to the Wednesday live chat, where, as you know, anything can happen.
Anything can happen.
Dinosaurs may, in fact, join us.
Got a long neck and a stegosaurus.
A long neck?
That's what my kids call them.
Okay.
They decided that the long necks are the scariest of all dinosaurs.
Why is that?
I think they're confused about various dietary habits.
Okay.
They think because the long necks have such long necks that they are kind of scary looking.
They're not wrong.
And so I don't know that they are quite absorbing the whole plant eater versus meat eater distinction.
You know, this is kind of, I'm almost ashamed to admit this, but I picked up, my wife has a paperback copy of Jurassic Park.
Oh, yeah.
I picked it up the other day, just like trying to look for something to read while in between child activities, you know?
Yeah.
And I remember reading, or at least starting to read it when I was like 12 years old or whatever, right before the movie came out. But it really pulls you in. Michael Crichton knew what the fuck he's doing, man.
Yeah. I mean, when he wasn't just going overboard with the cultural xenophobia. Remember that one, Rising Sun? About how the Japanese were buying up America.
Did he do Rising Sun? I remember the movie Rising Sun.
Yeah.
Wesley Snipes and Sean Connery teaming up.
He wrote the novel that was based on.
Okay. I mean, it was a different time. We were afraid of Japanese economic influence for a while there. All right. Want to get started? First one up, Michael Schwab says, short and sweet. Is Scott Coker actually a good guy? Do you think fighters' lives would be significantly improved if he was president of the UFC? You know, my short answer to that short and sweet question is I have no reason not to think that Scott Coker is actually a good guy.
Yeah, he seems to be, as far as fight promoters go, a relatively well-regarded figure.
Yeah.
I think that there are some people in the industry who have like qualms with Scott Coker. I think that the end of Strikeforce rubbed some people the wrong way.
What would you want him to do?
Well, I think that like there were some people who thought that he overpaid for Fedor Emelianenko and overpaid for Dan Henderson, and so mismanaged Strikeforce business dealings, which ultimately led to the demise of the company. I don't know if that's don't bring it up with me. I'm not the person saying it. I'm just telling you what I know.
If the biggest knock on Scott Coker is going to be that he was paying fighters too much,
he's paying two fighters too much, I think, is the knock.
Well, I mean, I think he also was one of the things that the UFC said about after acquiring Strikeforce and then being forced to pay some of these guys under their existing Strikeforce contracts and feeling like, hey, it was way too much. We never would have signed these guys for that much. So that was kind of a thing. But also, I don't know that that's... Like, if you take away that part and say, like, he pays Dan Henderson and Fedor and some people less, I still think you end up in the same place just because I think the San Jose Sharks people who were his partners in that, I think they got out of it not because they felt like, oh, the overhead is too high. I think they got out of it because they just didn't want to be in that business anymore and thought it was a good time to get out.
Yeah. I'm just merely telling you that, like, when I was doing my Scott Coker profile, I just had some people tell me that there were fighters and people in the industry that, like, came out of Strikeforce with hard feelings. So if the question is Scott Coker a good guy? I would say yes. Everything that I know about the guy makes him seem like he's a pretty good guy, and that he is relatively that he's in the business for the right reasons as much as you can be, but that there are dissenting opinions out there.
Right, but I mean, to be a fight promoter for as long as he has, at the level that he has, and to not have a ton of anger and bitterness toward him,
yeah,
is an accomplishment.
For sure. And you can tell that, like, he's relatively well regarded just by the sheer number of fighters who go back. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of the people who go to Bellator now go there because they had a previous relationship with Scott Coker, because they were in Strikeforce, so they knew him. You know, he's been a fixture on the West Coast MMA scene since the 70s, essentially. And he obviously has a good rapport with AKA, and has, you know, a lot of those guys were in Strikeforce. That's kind of like his hometown gym. And you know, those guys say nothing but positive things about him, and the fact that you can kind of tell when a fighter departs either the UFC or somewhere else that they might be bound for Bellator because of that Scott Coker relationship, I think probably speaks volumes for the guy.
Yeah, you never hear people be like, Scott Coker, that lying motherfucker, which you hear them say about a lot of fight promoters.
Yeah.
JH, got my koozie, took it to notes. Draft number 4.
This is a 4th draft?
Settle in for this one, is all I'm going to say. As my wife dropped a stack of mail on the counter, I had no idea how my life was about to change. Tucked between junk ads and brochures was an envelope with curious penmanship. It was addressed to me, CME, in the corner. My heart skipped a beat. It was thick. In fact, one could aptly say it was distinctly koozie-shaped. I tore it open like a child on Christmas morning. There it was. After a year of waiting, I held the official CME koozie in my hands. And a sticker. I was Ralphie, and this was my Red Ryder BB gun. AYFKM was printed on the bottom, just like the guys had promised. It was all happening for me now. No one was going to bring me down from this high. That's when I tried to explain to my wife what this was and why I was giggling with delight. She was unimpressed. But what are you going to put in it? She asked, dryly. It was right then I remembered I had given up carbonated beverages several months back. Thanks for the merch, guys. Seriously. What can you put in it if you're not into the carbonated beverages?
Cold brew coffee. You can get yourself a can of cold brew coffee.
See,
get yourself a can of wine. They put wine in cans these days.
It's
do. 2019, my guy.
I've had it. You don't have to tell me.
JH, get yourself a can of wine.
The cold brew coffees tend to come in those like slender cans, though.
Well, you can get them in I was just looking at them in the store the other day. You can get them in a full-on soda can kind of thing.
This reminds me, not the punk rock truck stop, but the other one on the other...
The PS Mart.
Yes.
Ghetto-ass PS Mart.
Let's say their decision to take a big barrel full of ice and put it right by the cash registers and stock it with tall boy cans of malt liquor is, I'm going to say, a great example of a business responding to the needs of the environment.
Yeah, they must have some...
They know where they are.
They must have some demographic information to say that one of their biggest impulse buys is tall cans of Colt 45.
Or that there's a lot of people who come in there and the only reason they're there is a tall boy of Colt 45, so you might as well put it right up front so you don't have them wandering through the store.
Right, but because those people got shit to do, they just want they want to grab
what they have to do is to stand right outside the PS Mart and drink their malt liquor and put everybody else ill at ease.
Yeah.
Joe Bond says, have you guys ever interviewed McGregor one-on-one? When was this? And what was he like?
I have.
Yeah, I have. Over the phone a couple times. You know, actually, the first time I think I interviewed him, it was all kind of very first starting to happen. Like he maybe only had 1 or 2 UFC fights. And I can't remember what the story was exactly, but I interviewed him and I remember when I called him, he was like just coming back from a run around the neighborhood basically in Dublin. And somebody he was like, oh hey, hold, can I call you back? People were recognizing him on the street and wanted to talk to him. And then when he called me back, he was still a little bit like enthusiastic about it. Like, hey, can you, like, wanted to tell me, like, this is why I had to call you back. People were wanting to talk to me and take pictures with me. And that was a very new thing for him, but he was really excited about it, which is a funny thing to think about now.
Yeah, I interviewed him just very briefly during his media day in the lead up to McGregor Mayweather, which in retrospect was sort of like Conor McGregor at the height of his powers.
Fuck you, pinstripe suit, all that stuff.
Yeah, and I remember, I think I've told this story on the podcast before, but I sat in my office literally all day waiting to talk to Conor McGregor because I knew I was going to get him for this very short window and that he had to do all this other like open workout media day stuff. And he was running on Conor McGregor time.
Yeah.
So it was supposed to start at one time and it ended up starting later than it was supposed to. And it kind of ran long. And then he did like a lengthy press conference. So I just kind of like sat in my office all day waiting to talk to him. And then I almost screwed it up because I was watching the media day online and there must have been like some significant lag on the internet that I didn't know about because I was watching him on a video of him at the die answering questions at the press conference when my phone rang and it was Adi Attar's number, his manager. So I thought it was Adi calling me to be like, hey, it's going to be like 15 minutes or whatever. So I answered it and I was like, hey, Adi. And the voice on the other end of the line goes like, it's Conor. And I was like, oh, hey, Conor. And he was like, I'm going to have to call you back, and hung up. And I was like, oh, shit. Well, I hope I didn't just like screw that up after sitting here for literally like 7 hours waiting to talk to this dude. But they did call me back. He had to do a TV thing, so he had to do it at like a certain time. So they did call me back right after that. I interviewed him. I remember I had it on my my digital voice recorder that I ended up interviewing him for like 4 minutes and 49 seconds. And my takeaway from the experience was it was totally worth it. It was totally worth it to sit in my office for like 7 hours and then talk to Conor McGregor for less than 5 minutes. Because at that point, he was just unfurling gold from his mouth.
Very quotable.
Every question that I asked him, he just uncorked this unbelievable, awesome, like eloquent, quotable response. And I was kind of like taken with it. Because the dude does have a recognizable charisma, especially if you talk to a lot of fighters on the phone. Like you talk to Conor McGregor and it's like, wow, well that guy, especially at this point in his career, he was just spinning yarns.
You know, sitting around all day waiting for a fighter to call you so you can get some story done is a very relatable experience to me. And it makes me think about how my wife, especially when she was doing more like freelance writing, I mean, now she has like a more regular job, so she doesn't do it. But when she was doing a lot more freelance writing and needing to talk to people on the phone a lot, and she came up with a list of ways to get people to call you back. And one of them was like, take a shower. Oh. Like as soon as you can't answer, then that's when like it'll trigger something in their brain to be like, oh yeah, I should call this person back. Another one was pour milk on cereal. Pour milk, like as soon as you get the cereal in the bowl, as soon as you pour the milk, like you know, people are gonna be able to hear it if you're gonna try to eat your cereal on the phone. You're not gonna be able to do it. It's gonna go soggy, but that'll trigger that phone call right away.
Yeah. So like my experience interviewing Conor McGregor has really made it surprising to see the figure that he has become. Because that happened to him pretty much immediately after I talked to him. Like right after the Mayweather-McGregor fight is kind of when he started to establish a, let's say, pattern of behavior. Yeah. Right? So to see to see him have devolved at this point into, I guess according to what your personal opinion is, but like kind of a disagreeable, dislikable, maybe despicable figure, depending on exactly what he is guilty of, is surprising.
Alexander Moffat is a tough one here. Which event in MMA would most represent the 2010s for you? Meaning this last decade that we just, from 2010 to present? Mm-hmm. So that's a tough one.
Yeah.
I'm tempted to say maybe like a UFC on Fox event. Is that really, those are going to stick in my mind as a definite era that the UFC was in. I mean, the UFC on ESPN events kind of remind you of those in some ways, but especially like both the UFC on Fox, like big Fox ones, and the UFC Fight Night like on Fox Sports, those are going to typify a lot of the just kind of like week to week MMA experience where you're watching some shit from Uberlandia, Brazil, and it takes 8 hours.
Yeah, so we're talking about an event that is like most indicative, most representative of the last decade.
I think so.
It would definitely be a long ass UFC on FS1 card. Like that would be the exemplar or whatever. That
We're
would
going
be
to throw it back to the desk a whole bunch.
Yeah.
Ads for Toyo tires. Dominic Cruz and TJ Dillashaw realizing that they're both rocking Toyos.
Yeah. Headlined by like Junior Dos Santos against Ben Rothwell or something like that.
Derek Maldonado says, Ben, during your travels, Chad gave me some wonderful book recommendations, especially Cherry by Nico Walker. What's that?
I told you about that. It's about the guy who comes back from Iraq and gets hooked on pills and starts robbing banks.
Oh, okay.
It's like novel. It's like a fictionalized memoir, kind of, based on this guy. A guy written by Nico Walker, who, by the way, is in prison right now for robbing a bunch of banks in the Cleveland area.
Oh, okay.
So it's like based on his. It's a novel, but it's based on his actual life.
So now I'll ask you if you have any recommendations, preferably fiction. You know, I meant to say this because I forget who recommended Jim Thompson and Population 1280, which I downloaded the sample after somebody mentioned it on the live chat a couple weeks ago, and then I started reading it, and I absolutely fucking loved it. Now I'm reading The Grifters by Jim Thompson. So I'm getting used to coming to the live chat to seek recommendations, not give them out. But if you haven't checked those out, I've really enjoyed those. Also, I'm always trying to tell people about Thomas Berger, who wrote Little Big Man, which is the one people probably know him for. But his two novels, one, Sneaky People, maybe the best like crime noir and the best use of an omniscient narrator in fiction I've ever seen. It's really tough to do. And The Feud by Thomas Berger. Those are two really good ones to check out. Juan P. Garzon says, have you heard of the Mauro Ranallo and that wrestler dude issue? I hope the best for Mr. Ranallo, but selfishly hope he would leave WWE so that he can go to Bellator to make that booth bearable. I'd heard something that there was some kind of flap with Mauro Ranallo and a wrestler, but I don't know what it is.
A long time ago, he got into it with John Bradshaw Layfield, right? Like accused him of bullying.
I think there's something more recent.
Now there's something new now?
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm not plugged in enough.
Yeah, I haven't been paying attention.
Kelton Ingram says, this week I suffered some arboreal dundasso as I was poked in the eye by a tree branch.
Oh.
Okay, I get it now. I soon realized, wow, I can't see well or open that eye fully. This does suck. This got me thinking, what are some aspects of the game that fighters have told you over the years are a lot more difficult than the public realizes? Everyone can imagine getting punched in the face sucks, but not everyone might think of the mental toll of issues such as dealing with losses or waiting for the next offer. Yeah, that's true. I mean, waiting for the next offer is something I hear from a lot of fighters, especially these days. You know, the big UFC roster, and if you're not one of the top names, and how you might go in there and win. I was talking to Drew Dober about this not too long ago, where I think the last one he fought on was that Minneapolis card where he won, like a first round knockout or something, and then is just sitting around for months, waiting and ready to fight, ready to go into training camp. Also, though, he was talking about being a kind of a big lightweight, so that he can't really take short notice fights at lightweight. He needs the time to be able to diet down so he doesn't have a terrible weight cut to try to make at the very end. And that probably limits you somewhat, but the difficulty in just, like, the UFC can make you wait 6 months for most of the contracts between fight offers. And if they do, that's tough, man. Like, to wait 6 months, not have a paycheck, and just to not know. Like, just be sitting around and trying to find the motivation to go to the gym every day and still put in that work, which is easier for some people than others. There's some guys who will tell you, like, it's hard for them to really get up and go and put in that hard work if they don't know what it's for and they don't have a thing in mind.
Yeah, I would say two things. And again, I feel like I talk about the story that I wrote for Bleacher Report about the aftermath of fights a couple of years ago now. I feel like I talk about it a lot, but it keeps coming up. So I would say these two things. First, kind of like what you were talking about, I talked to a lot of fighters who essentially talked about the emotional boom and bust or roller coaster of being a fighter. And part of it was leading up to a fight, you have a ton of built-in structure in your life. Like you have to be at the gym at certain times, you're dieting, you have all of these goals, you have this mission basically to go win a fight, and then the fight itself takes like 15 minutes, 25 minutes, sometimes 20 seconds. And then it's over. And then in the aftermath of that, you go home, no one sees you, like you have this sort of like flashpoint of fame where all of the MMA fans are seeing you. Then you go home and it's kind of like you disappear, but when you return to your normal life, you have none of that. You have no structure, you have no plans, you have nothing to work toward, I guess. So it's like this huge, even when you win, like emotional drop off.
Yeah.
That you have to fill in some way. And actually, like when I interviewed Jessica Rose Clark, she told me that like it had started to bother her so much, or she had started to identify this pattern in her life of like working really hard for this fight, and then either you win and you're super happy, or you lose and you're super depressed. And one way or another, it's basically party time. After that, like you drink a lot of alcohol and like you don't go to the gym and all this stuff.
Or even the people who don't drink are just like eating pizza and doing all the things they couldn't do.
So she was like, I had to start coming up with all of these goals for myself that have nothing to do with the fight. She had to be like, okay, after the fight, as soon as I'm physically able, I will be back in the gym to try to do as many pull-ups as I can. Or like, I'm going to try to get my mile run time under this, whatever time you're trying to do it. Just so you have like this built-in structure that is independent of the fight. The other thing that Scott Holtzman told me was that like his most arduous physical and emotional recoveries after fights have all happened after wins. And he said that one, when he was fighting an XFC, like lightweight championship fight in this independent MMA organization that went the distance, went 25 minutes, and he won it and won the title, but said he, like, his hands were so swollen afterwards from punching the other guy that he couldn't tie his shoes or like do all this stuff at his house. He was like, I think he said, my hands were swollen up like lunch boxes. And so, like, I had to get my wife to tie my shoes for me, which is something that we don't often think about. Like, even when you win, you come out of it, in many cases, kind of fucked up.
Also, though, a good reminder, too, when people are like, hey, why won't, like, if this fight gets switched to the main event, why won't they fight 5 rounds instead of 3 rounds? And it's like, 2 extra rounds, 10 minutes of extra fighting can be a significant toll on your body.
Yeah, one time Dan Hardy told me that he fought George St. Pierre for the welterweight title as the last fight on like his first UFC contract, or like his existing UFC contract. So he was like, it was one of the biggest mistakes I ever made, because I fought for the title and I fought 5 rounds against George St. Pierre for the same money that I would have gotten for a 3-round fight against someone else.
Yeah.
So he's like, and when you think about it, 5 rounds, that's almost 2 fights.
Yeah.
It's like you're 1 round away from having 2 3-round fights. So he was like, that was again something I had never thought of before. But like,
plus George St. Pierre going to go in there and damn near tear your arm off.
Yeah.
Tim Barron says, what the hell are we doing trying to make the Tony Khabib fight in goddamn New York? Must we give the MMA gods one more reason? Well, I think that one is, it's going to be a big fight, so you want it somewhere big where you can really reap the economic benefits. Khabib says he won't fight in Vegas until the commission there apologizes to him, right?
Eye roll.
Apologizes to him for punishing him for his role in a major outside the cage melee. But then New York makes the most sense. I mean, I understand what you're saying there too about the New York Athletic Commission. Hopefully they've learned to keep an eye on a motherfucker and what he's doing when he's on the scale, like leaning on coaches or the towels or what. If they haven't learned by now, then they'll never learn. But the UFC also would love to do a fight like that in a market like New York, because you can charge more for tickets and advertising stuff. Like all in those investor documents where they were trying to get people on board with, helping them buy the UFC. One of the things that they laid out was, hey, we're going to be in New York, and like now that it's legal in New York, you can make so much more money as a sports media property for events in New York. And they compared like average NBA ticket price versus the Knicks average ticket price, shit like that. And like it's just higher all across the board. So that's probably what the UFC's thinking.
I do understand the question though, because it does seem like having it in New York just gives you a bigger opportunity to have other shit go wrong.
Yep. Yes, it does.
Because now you have to think about all of the commission issues. that could crop up.
Michael Etzel says, my question is for Ben. If the Iranian Hulk were to kidnap your family, oh, this is good. We're off to an excellent start. And the only way to save them was to defeat him in a cage fight, Ryzen rules. Do you, Benjamin Aurelius Folks, believe that you could tap the Hulk? And part 2, how much would the Hulk have to pay you for a rematch? Dundas and the Schmo on commentary.
This is a question, though, where once again we need to reference that we know almost nothing about the Iranian Hulk. We've never even seen the guy move around.
No, but I mean, one thing I do feel like I know is that I'm not going for arm bars against the Iranian Hulk. And choking him is going to be difficult.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to try to triangle the Iranian Hulk. That's right out the window. Heel hook? Never really been that much of a leg lock guy, but I might have to start if I had to fight the Iranian Hulk. Honestly, I think my strategy would be to approach it as a war of attrition. Mm-hmm. I'm going to wear down the Hulk.
Yeah.
I'm going to win this one with cardio.
Yeah. You stay on your bike.
Mm-hmm.
I think you could take him.
Thank you.
Let's sign the contract. Let's get it done. Let's get something on the books.
Let's get something on the books between me and the Iranian Hulk.
Just hope he doesn't find out about the pile of trash neck.
Well, I feel like if he does any research at all, that's probably going to come up. Mark M. says, how did you guys end up living in Montana? Do you like it compared to the other states you've lived in? Chad is from Montana originally.
Yep.
And I came up here for grad school after having never been here. But I love Montana. I loved it right away. And it's weird sometimes to think about how now Montana feels like home to me, even though since I grew up mostly in California, I will never be a Montanan, and they will never let me ever forget that. My kids can be Montanans. They were both born here. But me and my wife, no. Especially if you're from California.
Yeah. Well, both of us have also lived elsewhere, so we returned here by choice.
We did.
So I guess there is evidence to suggest that we like it as compared to the other places we've lived.
Sunny Weathers says, what was the first ticket you got for breaking the law? And what was the last? Well, we know what the last one for you was.
Yeah, parking in that Leaf collection zone.
Wish a motherfucker would park in the Leaf collection zone.
I still have to pay that ticket. Doubles if you don't pay it in 30 days. So I better get on that.
Yeah, you better.
Don't want to let it slip through the cracks.
What was the first ticket you got?
I got a ticket for riding my bike on the sidewalk when I was like 15, 14 maybe.
Wow. Just no breaks given by the Missoula Police Department there, huh?
No.
Were you being an asshole or something?
No, but it's legal now. If you
see people do it
to
now.
Ride your bike on the sidewalk, but back in the day you couldn't ride your bike on the sidewalk in the downtown area. I was also with my friend Bryce, who today is a literal rocket scientist.
Okay.
He's like a physicist. He builds lasers he runs a laser lab at a big university. And but he is not the most normal person, like conversationally normal. And he was super high when we got these tickets, and like couldn't remember his social security number, couldn't remember his address, things like that really made it seem like we were lying to the cop. I remember standing there listening to him to like answer all these questions, being like, oh yeah, this cop thinks we're lying to him right now, even though we are actually telling him the truth. So yeah, we had to go in and pay some money for that one. Luckily, back in those days, the municipal court judge in Missoula trafficked under the nickname "Let 'em go Loudon."
Oh yeah,
because you would go in and he would basically like give you the lightest possible touch.
Do you promise never to do it again?
Yeah. He basically charge you like a $25 court service fee and send you on your way.
Well, even now, I have friends around Missoula who approach when they're parking downtown, where like you have to pay for parking. The fine for not paying for parking is so small.
Yeah.
Like it used to be like $5. I think now maybe it's gone up to 10 or something.
Yeah.
But even then, you get one free one like every 6 months.
Yeah.
And a friend of ours whose wife works for the parking commission says that there are people who clearly they know exactly when their 6 months is up and when they can park without paying again. But other people were like, the fine is so small that I'll just do it all. I'll just never pay for parking. And sometimes I'll get a ticket, but I feel like in the end, I still come out financially ahead.
Plus, like see, now we're getting deep into the weeds here, but the parking meters in downtown Missoula are like infuriating.
There's an app on your phone.
You can do the app on your phone, but like if you actually get out and try to use the parking meter, first of all, it's like $1 for an hour, and it doesn't take dollar bills. So you either have to have 4 quarters, or you have to put a $1 charge on your debit card. Infuriating.
I think the first ticket I got was I was speeding on the freeway in San Diego, and I was speeding like a motherfucker too. I think I was doing like 90, and the cop told me that he thought I was doing like 90, but he was only going to write me up for like 80 or something.
Nice.
And the last one I got was for expired registration on my car, which when the cop pulled me over and he was like, your registration is expired by like a lot. And I was like, oh yeah, now that you think about it, I can't remember paying it recently. Like, that checks out. Ronan Healy says, Chad the novelist, what determines whether an audiobook version on a novel is recorded? I've looked for Champion of the World in audio form, but alas, no luck. Is it up to the author to push for it, or is it the publisher's decision? And then Kylan Comiol, you can definitely get an audiobook version of it read by Kevin Kennerly, which does sound like Sir Nigel just made up a name.
Yeah, there's an audiobook of Champion of the World. It's on Audible and available elsewhere. And Kevin Kennerly, by the way, did a really good job reading it. Makes Garfield Taft sound a little bit like Jim Brown.
Okay.
Which is like, okay, I can dig that.
Yeah.
So audiobook rights are, in addition, they're independent of your publishing rights. So like if you publish a book with a publisher, a major publishing company in America, they will also try to sell audiobook rights. And so somebody has to come in and buy those. Champion of the World sold to Blackstone Audio. And then they independently, so they own the audio rights, then they independently make the production of the audiobook, and then or your publishing company itself, if you get published by someone like Random House, who has an audio department in-house, internally, they can buy the rights and produce the audiobook themselves. So like Champion of the World was produced by an independent audiobook company, and The Blaze is going to be produced in-house by Penguin Random House Audio. But they're both, as near as I can tell, similar experiences.
This reminds me to skip down to this question from Jill Giorgio, who says, how come the people who pre-ordered The Blaze months ago aren't getting any love? I want to win a signed copy of Champion of the World paperback too. You're just teaching me to procrastinate. She's got a point.
She does have a point. I just didn't have those books before last week. They sent me 2 big boxes of them.
Well, can people send in proof that they have pre-ordered The Blaze months ago?
I guess.
There you go, Jill.
I mean, we're almost out of copies now anyway, so unless they send me some more, we'll see what happens.
How many is your hand tired from signing Tom Selleck's name?
Some people did, in fact, write in to want me to sign some different names. So, yeah, some people are getting some personalized Tito Ortiz signatures.
Okay, cool. Jesse Laurenti says...
Speaking of which, you said you were bringing a Tito Ortiz quote.
Oh, yeah. Are you ready for it? Is it time?
I mean, I guess so.
We're halfway through, so I guess it's time. All right. Today's Tito Ortiz quote for CME Patreon Pledge Drive Month. Quote.
This is... Oh, wait, you're reading this?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought you were going to do it off the top of your head there from memory.
I train actually 6 days a week. 5 days a week, I'll train 3 days a week. One of those days, I'll train 2 days of the week. So 6 days a week, I'll be training.
Wow. That's a good one.
Straight from the horse's mouth.
That's a good one. That's a good Tito Ortiz quote right
Yep.
there. Even I can appreciate that one.
Boggles the mind. Jesse Laurenti says, I was listening to Ariel's show a couple weeks ago and realized how terrible Luke Rockhold is as an interview and how amazing Gina Carano was. So I was curious, who have been the best and worst interviews you guys have talked to? Oh, man. Brock Lesnar was never easy. Because Brock Lesnar would do the thing where no matter what you asked, he would want to find a way to feel like it was a stupid question.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of like I don't know if that's I hate doing this so much and I want to make sure you know it kind of thing, or if it's a defense mechanism. Like, I'm going to act like everybody else is an idiot, and that will make me feel smarter or like help me kind of protect myself in that. But it made him difficult to interview. Yeah. Also, for a guy who is legitimately charismatic when he wants to be and when he's on camera, the worst phone interview in the world might be Rampage Jackson, just because he won't even try to pretend that he wants to do it. Yeah. Or that he doesn't absolutely hate doing it.
Yeah. You know, I feel like we've come a long way, though, in terms of like the quality of fighter interviews. Because back in the day, when I first got into it, I would say most of them were bad. Like most of the fighter interviews were just not that interesting. I remember really early on, I interviewed Chuck Liddell, and he asked me if we could do the interview via text. And I was like, nope, can't do it via text, Chuck. And he was pretty bad. Cain Velasquez is not bad, but is like just epically vanilla, like just like epically boring.
Yeah.
Oftentimes you can tell a guy who has come out of a Division I NCAA athletic program where they are kind of taught, at least through osmosis and sometimes by literal like media training courses, to be disinteresting, to be uninteresting in video or in interviews with the...
Well, just to not fuck up.
Right, to not like cause quote unquote bulletin board material or like you to cause a scandal that would look bad. Nobody wants to bring scandal on the team, bro. Everyone wants to do what's right for the team, right? I did an epically bad phone interview with Phil Davis once.
Phil Davis is not going to... in person, Phil Davis is great. Yeah. And on the phone, it's the complete opposite.
That's why I was surprised how bad it was on the phone. It has been a long time, though, since I did one that I would describe as just really, really bad. And maybe, and at The Athletic, we get to pick our spots a little bit more.
Yeah.
So we're not just interviewing whoever. And what part of what makes some of those MMA interviews kind of bad is that it's almost completely worthless unless you have a really specific thing that you have to write a story about to take part in like the 10-minute pre-fight interviews, either through the UFC or Bellator, because they'll do it like a fighter will basically have a window where they will do 10-minute long interviews with all these different media outlets, and they do them back to back to back to back to back. So like everybody's asking the same questions. The fighter doesn't want to do it. The fighter is bored and maybe annoyed
and hungry.
And so like it's almost impossible to get anything of any worth out of that unless you are, working for a niche MMA facing website where like you have to have the fighter A says such and such about fighter B ahead of their fight story.
Chris Gary says, so what are your thoughts on Frozen 2? Favorite song, favorite outfit? What do you think of Olaf? Ben, if you haven't seen it, what do you hope to see in it?
I mean, I don't want to do too many spoilers.
Yeah, don't spoil it for me. I might end up going this weekend.
So, Frozen, it's tough to follow Frozen, first of all. Like, you are already kind of up against it merely through the entire prospect of doing a Frozen 2. You're probably just not going to rebottle the magic of Frozen 1. And Frozen 2 was okay. Like, my kids really liked it. My kids thought it was terrific. So, that mission accomplished there. That was basically what the point of the thing. It feels like they put a lot of plots in there. Like, maybe every plot that was on the whiteboard in the writer's room
throw them all in there.
Made it into the movie, which I felt like was a lot. Some of it is good. Some of it's a little iffy. You and I talked before we started doing this. There were some changes to the Olaf character that I found kind of puzzling. Before he was just sort of like a bumbling sidekick along for comic relief, and that's still there, but they've added this additional layer for him of like having taken on more intelligence. And so like one of the gimmicks of Olaf in Frozen 2 is that he will continually bring up somewhat troubling philosophical thoughts about, mortality or
that's what you want from your magical snowman come to life.
Growth and change. And so like the kids of course don't notice that stuff. They're just there for the butt jokes, which are still there. So that's good. But as an adult viewer, I was like, that's an interesting, unexpected and somewhat off-putting twist on the Olaf character. Again, and with the music, like you're not going to have another Let It Go. right? And there are times during Frozen 2 when I was like, oh man, they are trying real hard to get another Let It Go out of this thing. The best song / video sequences, they have Kristoff do like an 80s style heavy metal power ballad kind of thing about Anna. And like it looks like an 80s heavy metal power ballad video, so that's probably the best musical spot in Frozen 2.
Hair blowing in the breeze. You got that?
Yeah.
Denim jacket.
Yep.
Walking on the pier.
Pretty much the whole 9 yards. But like your kids will like it. It's I would describe it as quote unquote pretty good.
Ryan Robinson says, "Who are the ghosts of MMA Christmas past, present, and future?"
Well, remember we did
Co-Main
Event podcast Christmas special.
We did a radio play that you can look up, I'm sure. And that one, I think the ghosts of Christmas or MMA Christmas past was Ken Shamrock, right? And then present was it Tyron Woodley and Sage Northcutt?
It might have been, yeah.
And then I don't remember what the future was.
No, neither do I.
I still think you can make a strong case for Ken Shamrock as the ghost of MMA Christmas past.
Yeah.
Future, I was thinking this about, I was working on writing something about how Paige Van Zant, her arc through the UFC, which seems like she might be headed out of it now. We'll see, she's on the last fight of her contract coming up, and everything about it is very illustrative of how those things tend to go with the UFC, where you get somebody that the UFC really likes and they're hot on, and maybe they're pushing them early or pushing them harder than what their actual ability or accomplishments in the cage have merited, pushing them ahead of other people. There's anger and resentment about that, but the UFC still, once they decide this is our person, we're all in behind this person. And then once that person stops doing your bidding as the UFC, like either they want more money or they want something else or they want to do something else, then suddenly they were never that good and they just didn't ever get it done and they were not worth the more money, and we're going to put them up and we'll send them off on a unappealing fight for one reason or another that we won't do a whole lot to hype, and then we'll see how you like that. And that stuff from like some of Joe Silva's stuff that we've seen in the process of discovery for the antitrust lawsuit shows you that that's not an accident. That is a like premeditated strategy by the UFC to do that.
Ghost of Christmas future might be Israel Adesanya.
Okay.
Right now.
Yeah. Aruz Islam says, is Champy the new old man Frankie Edgar, who was the new California man Uriah Faber of the women's divisions?
Yeah.
She's already getting her 4th title shot in less than 6 years in the UFC at 32 years of age.
I have to admit that thought did cross my mind when they just announced the Weili Zhang Joanna Jędrzejczyk title fight. I was like, she is now established or reached that point in that division where she's the veteran fighter who can just get a title shot after like 1 or 2 wins.
Yeah, but there, I think that there weren't a whole lot of other good options.
True.
And stylistically, you look at that fight on paper, I want to see that.
Yeah, that's a banger.
Yeah. Tyler Sayer says, can you guys go ahead and let us know what powerful media entity you've gotten in bed with to launch the power rankings to the heights that they've reached? Actually, what we did is we made a deal with the devil. Mm-hmm. Black Phillip came and asked if we wanted to live deliciously, and we said we did. So I don't know exactly what all is going to come due eventually. I'm not looking forward to it, to be honest. I think in retrospect, maybe selling our souls just to make the power rankings into the most powerful tool in the history of broadcast media. Maybe we should have thought that through a little more, but we didn't, and now here we are.
And also, I cut a side deal with the Illuminati.
Okay.
And then an additional side deal with the Freemasons.
Wow, that's a lot of side deals.
And then one with Thanos.
Oh, shit.
So, there you go.
Wow. We have a lot to discuss up there.
But, on the positive end of things, I learned a lot of cool new secret handshakes.
Okay, cool. I'm glad to hear that. Lieutenant Colombo says, you want to have some holiday fun? When Khabib entered the UFC, he was 16-0. Please pick out a few of Khabib's regional scene opponents and have Chad attempt to nail the pronunciation of their names. Oh, and just one more thing. Congrats to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, 2019 Grey Cup champions. Okay, that reminds me. We didn't get. First of all, I'm going to look up Khabib's.
Go Blue Bombers, by the way.
We didn't get to the question, I think, that we had in listener mail where somebody pointed out the guy of the Blue Bombers with the shorts.
Yeah, we did have one picked out about the Blue Bombers for listener mail on Monday. And we just didn't have time for it. Magomedov. That one's pretty easy.
Well, we've got a lot of practice with the Magomeds. Okay, how about the name right above Magomedov?
Ramazan Kurbanismaliov.
Nailed it.
Vusal Bayramov.
He's fought a couple different Saids.
Shabulat Shamhalsev.
Kadzik Abadzian. He triangle choked that guy.
Ashat Shaganyan.
You know what, though? I'm a little disappointed that one of my favorite things to do is to look at people's records on the regional scene, especially people who've been around a while, and look at the event names that they fought at on the regional scene. And maybe it's just a regional difference, but that they don't, a lot of these are pretty normal. Like, Battle on the Caucasus, Battle on Dawn, Union Nation Cup Final, Golden Fist Russia sounds kind of awesome.
Yeah, I would watch. Would get tickets to Golden Fist Russia if I was in the area.
But especially, now I have to look it up. If you look at guys from like the Midwest and some of the names of the events that they fought on in the Midwest, such as Gerald Harris. He fought in, where was it? Slammin' Jammin' Weekend 2. That's my recent favorite. Yeah.
Didn't
also
quite
fought
live
at
up to Slammin' Jammin' Weekend 1, but it was still fun.
C3 Fights Knockout Rockout Weekend.
Oh, there we go.
It's a whole weekend for that one. Also fought at a Global Showdown, which took place in Thackerville, Oklahoma. So I don't know.
Global, quote unquote, global showdown?
I don't know exactly how global it was, but maybe it had to be there. Cat Pope says, "All right, fellas, I figured it out. If I get a time machine with the express purpose of making MMA fights, I'm bringing 2010 Shane Carwin to fight 2019 Francis Ngannou."
This is a flashback to his earlier question.
I know you've been asked this before, but today, who's getting in that time machine with you, and where are you going?
If we had a time machine, we could go anywhere, or are we going just MMA time machine?
I feel like the nature of the question suggests that we're trying to bring people from different eras so that they can fight. Honestly, 2010 Shane Carwin versus 2019 Francis Ngannou.
That'd be pretty fun.
Yeah. I mean,
That'd be pretty fun.
I will say this, that one would be fun for as long as it lasts.
Yeah.
Don't look for that one to last too long. A part of me wants to say, like, just have John Jones go back and beat up guys like Chuck Liddell and stuff in their prime, just so we can stop talking about it. Like, because I think he kind of trashes those guys.
Yeah. What if you took prime John Jones and put him in UFC 1?
Oh, come on. That's just mean.
It's just like a cruel and unusual punishment.
You know what I would kind of want to do? Like, it's hard to do in MMA as much, but like in boxing, you do like where you just be like, take like Jack Dempsey and put him up against, not maybe up against the very best, because the heavyweights are just so much bigger now, for one thing.
Yeah.
But, if you could take like prime Roy Jones Jr. against prime Jack Dempsey, something like that.
Yeah.
You could have some fun.
Who is the pioneer era heavyweight who, if you could take him out in his prime, would fare the best?
Maybe Mark Coleman.
Coleman would probably be okay just because of the takedown ability. That's always going to be there.
He headbutts away from him, though, and you take a lot of the game.
Yeah. What about somebody like Maurice Smith? Like, pretty good kickboxer, pretty good takedown defense, pretty good cardio. Those skills seem like they translate. He's not going to probably come in and beat Francis Ngannou, but like, he probably, if you could get him, if you could get 30-year-old Maurice Smith, he could probably be like a middle of the pack UFC heavyweight today.
Or Boss Rutan.
There you go. Boss Rutan, pretty good.
I still remember when I was working for the IFL, and the IFL put together a coaches super fight with Maurice Smith and Marco Huas. And Maurice Smith, for one thing, wore leather boxing trunks in the fight. And when I asked him afterwards why he wore leather trunks for an MMA fight, he was like, I'm going to be on TV, man. I want to look good. And the fight was like, people were leaving. It was like the main event kind of thing, and people were walking out. It was like a 5-round fight, and the first like 2 or 3 rounds was just Marco Huas trying to get takedowns. When he did get takedowns, Maurice Smith just stalling the action on the ground, not doing much of anything. People booing, a really slow-paced fight. And then it was like, at a certain point, you could see Marco Huas walk out there, and suddenly he looked like a middle-aged man who was tired, who had been doing a lot of work, and now he was tired. And Maurice Smith, it was like he saw that too and just went like, okay, now's the time. And then boom, 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 put him away. And it was like he clearly had been... That was his entire strategy, was just like, this is going to suck. People are going to hate it, but I'm just going to make sure nothing happens, and he'll get tired, and then I will piece him up. And that's exactly what he did.
One of the very first UFCs that I attended as a fan, I saw Maurice Smith. We were standing in line outside the weigh-in at like the theater at the Hard Rock or wherever they were having these weigh-ins. Maurice Smith was there dressed like a damn superhero, wearing white basketball shoes, white parachute pants, and a white, like, Under Armour skin-tight shirt tucked into his parachute pants. Just looking like all you needed to do was throw a cape on that dude and he would take off. Like, dressed up like Superman or some shit. And, like, he was going down the line. People were taking pictures with him and stuff. He stopped to take a picture with this one guy. The guy couldn't get his camera to work. Like, and so Maurice Smith was like, let me see it. And, like, took the camera and, like, fucked around with it for a while and, like, fixed the guy's camera. And it was like, there you go. And then they took the picture. And I was like, wow, Maurice Smith seems like a genuinely nice person.
It's a touching story.
Then he shot lasers out of his eyes and stopped Lex Luthor from taking over the world.
All right. Here's an interesting one from Matt Evans, who says, on 13th November, New York Times Magazine ran a story about podcasts called Even Nobodies Have Friends Now, for Better or Worse. It explores a so-called parasocial relationship between listeners and hosts. Apparently, this is a term coined in 1956 to describe the connection between television viewers and announcers and anyone else who spoke in direct address to the camera. All right, I'm going to skip over some of this stuff that's just taken from the article. My question is, how often have you run into a co-maniac, and when you do, is it weird because they think of you almost as a friend, while from your perspective, they're a complete stranger? Happens sometimes. You know when it always is surprising to me is when I run into somebody in Missoula, in our town. Mm-hmm. Like I saw somebody at the grocery store, and he was like, hey. Because, somebody at the grocery store is like, hey, Ben. And I'm like, okay, quick scan of how I know this person.
How have I wronged this person in the past?
Yeah, and then they're just like, oh, like I'm a podcast listener, and I've seen Chad around town and everything. And then the thing that's weird is that every time, like I've been somewhere where somebody's like, oh, like, hey, like I listen to podcasts, like let me buy you a beer, like if you're in town or something. And every time I don't want to do it because that's just the like antisocial bent that is in my nature apparently. And then every time I do it, it's cool. Yeah. And I have fun, and I always end up being like, oh, this person is actually like an interesting, smart person. And yeah, that was actually fun. And yet I always have to learn the lesson over every single time.
Yeah, the co-maniacs, by and large, are delightful.
Yeah.
When you either... Because I interviewed a bunch of them for a few stories that I've written for The Athletic, and every time I did it, I came away from the experience feeling like pretty enthused, actually. It was like kind of inspiring, like recharged me a little bit, because it's a reminder of like, oh, there are smart, like forward-thinking, sensitive, articulate people out there who are MMA fans, and like it's always cool to talk to those people. And I agree with you that like, every time you get a chance to rub elbows with the listeners, it is almost always a positive experience. Like there are almost always people where I'm like, oh, like we would be friends with this person, or like we are friends with this person. You see, like people often say it or send it in an email, when you talk to them, they'll be like, you probably think this is weird, but like I listen to you guys so much that like I think of you as my friends, or like you like there are people who have listened to the podcast for so long that they basically are like, I know your whole family, because when you started you didn't have kids and all this stuff. And I'm always like, you know what? I don't even think that's that weird. Like, because every time I've ever talked or met with a CME listener, like I always kind of feel the same way. So I don't think that it's all that weird, actually.
Here's an interesting question. Modern Dangle asks, if T-Ferg beats Khabib in April 2020, would that retroactively make him the best lightweight of the 2010s?
No.
Who is the best lightweight of the 2010s?
I mean, how can you retroactively be the best lightweight of the 2010s
if
you don't win until the next decade?
Because he was still doing all this stuff. I mean, the win streak that he got right now. We're just going
to think so much differently about it that it's going to change our perception of that decade? I mean, I guess that's possible.
I could see that if you beat Khabib.
But if the thing that changes your mind happens in a different decade.
But just barely. April.
Is it fair to like
4 months in? You're going to be a stickler about that?
I mean, it didn't happen in the decade.
Okay. Who in your mind is the best lightweight of the 2010s? Khabib?
Probably Khabib. That's a tough question, though. Like, we just had to do this for the Athletic, right? We just had to do, like, an all-decade team where we chose the best fighter of every weight class, and some of them are very easy. John Jones, for example, has had almost all of his fights in the UFC in this decade and has clearly been somewhat peerless during that time, so he's the obvious pick. Some of the weight classes were super hard. Middleweight, and, you know, I think you can make the argument that lightweight is another one of those where, like, there just hasn't really been a dominant person. There just hasn't really been a person who established that dominance to be the consensus or immediate top-of-mind pick for who's the best person of that decade. But I guess that it's probably Khabib. Like, nobody's beat the guy.
Yeah. Matt Evans asks, have you been watching The Mandalorian? It's the best Star Wars content since Return of the Jedi. It also stars Gina Carano. She's going down great with journalists who are falling over themselves to say what a great interview she is, confirming Jesse's comment above. Actually, I just sat down and watched the first 2 episodes of The Mandalorian the other night. Unbeknownst to me, my wife signed us up for Disney Plus.
Did she get the package deal?
I don't know.
Did she get the bundle?
I mean, we already have like Hulu and I have ESPN Plus, so I don't think so. But after seeing enough people talking about it and stuff on Twitter, and I was like, all right, I want to be down with the zeitgeist. I want to know. I want to be in on this conversation. And I came home from a hockey game on Monday, and one of my least favorite parts about the hockey league that I play in is there are a lot of late games, and it's almost impossible for me to come home and go right to sleep afterwards because you just get, like kind of jacked up on excitement. And also, if you did not play that well, then you'll just end up laying there in bed and thinking about like various moments that are still bugging you. And so I've kind of learned like don't even try to do it. Like, and I came home and ended up staying up way too late watching The Mandalorian. Motherfucking Baby Yoda and shit out here. I was like, okay, I know what you're doing with this cute ass little Baby Yoda thing, and yet it just fucking works, man. It just works.
Yeah.
The shit is adorable.
I have not seen it yet, although I do want to. We are almost at the point now where I think as a household we're going to make a television move because football season is almost over. So I don't need to have a ridiculous satellite dish package to enable me to watch my beloved Montana Grizzlies on such sports networks as Root Sports Northwest.
Yeah, you got to have Root Sports on there.
That ain't in your basic cable package
Channel
right
like
there.
450, just so you can watch the Grizz versus Sacramento State or some shit.
So, once the FCS season is over, I'm going to have some decisions to make, and I think part of that will be probably moving to the bundle, where we get ESPN Plus, Disney Plus, and Hulu.
Not yet, man. It's playoff season now.
I'm going to the game on Saturday.
What?
My dad's coming to town. We're going to go to the game.
Nice. You guys going to pregame? You going to hit up the tailgates and
probably
down some jungle juice and things like that? Drinking somebody's weird trailer?
Probably a little bit because we're getting the tickets from my dad's friend who has a big standard tailgate. He's a tailgate host, so we're probably going to hit up that tailgate.
Nice. All right, coming up here at the end, let's pick one more. Okay. We'll go out on this one. From Ryan Busatil. Tito Ortiz thinks he could beat John Jones. Is this the dictionary example of just saying stuff?
Yes. And I saw Luke Thomas on Twitter was like pointing out that statement has no news value. And he's basically like,
yes. Yeah, no,
like,
that's totally true.
Why are people reporting this and writing stories about it? Like Tito Ortiz saying that he could beat John Jones. It's more than just like, empty and inflated. It actually like has no value as news.
Yeah.
And I was like, he's right about that.
He's absolutely right about that. I mean, it's just content. Like, it's just easy, cheap content. And yeah, somebody just says stuff. We'll just throw it in the headline. Guy just says stuff.
I mean, even if that is your justification, like even if you are the working for one of the websites where that you basically have to do that. How many people are clicking on that story? Like, who's the person out there that is like, unless it's just for yucks, I guess.
That's got to be what they're clicking on it for. I don't think anybody's been like, interesting. Let me hear his reasoning.
Right. Like, who is seeing that story and being like, yes, I definitely want to consume more of this content. I definitely want to hear Tito talk some more about how he could beat John Jones.
Yeah. Well, all right. That's it. That's our hour for the live stream. We're going to record our movie club podcast about Glengarry Glen Ross, which we watched this week. If you're a top tier patron, you can get in on that with us. Also, as far as checking out the pledge drive, I think we're about halfway to our goal.
Really?
If you're one of the $1 tier subscribers right now, you're watching the live chat, you're enjoying the hell out of yourself, you're thinking, you know what? $5 a month is nothing. It's a cup of coffee. I'll go ahead and I'll do that. I'll push them up toward the edge, and then we'll go ahead and release our Irishman episode. Do it. Don't think. Just do it.
Just do it. Don't even think about it.
Yeah. Don't even think about it. Just give us your money.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
We will see you again next week at this same time.